TV1, we present news and information through the night via satellite from BBC World.
In agreement, no US car plants will close until after September next year. That may alter Ford's timescale, but not its resolve to find profitability. Brian Milligan, BBC News.
There's more intrigue and controversy surrounding the collapse of Enron, the American energy trading giant. The company's auditor, Arthur Andersen, Thursday said it destroyed or disposed of a substantial number of documents relating to the audit of Enron. The collapse of Enron is now the focus of 3 investigations by US authorities. It's the largest corporate failure in US history. Later on Friday, the auction of the more lucrative parts of Enron comes to an end. It's known that global banking giants Citicorp and UBS Warburg have submitted bids for a controlling stake in its dormant energy trading business. What's left of the company is in the process of being sold off in the bankruptcy court, and the latest revelations could affect the value of those profitable parts.
They need a guarantee, or somebody to guarantee the contracts, or they can't trade, and that's why it's obvious interest to a financial institution, because they can provide these financial guarantees. And see, until they can get the guarantee, until they can syndicate the loans, it's not viable. And the longer it doesn't trade, the less it's worth. But on the other hand, it did make 2.2 billion of profit, in as much as you believe what was produced, and so it's clearly worth something to somebody. And also the banks have got these loans out to them, so they want it sorted.
That was Hilary Cook from Barclays Stockbrokers. Turning from troubled companies to troubled currencies, Argentina's currency markets are expected to reopen on Friday after being closed for more than 2 weeks. The Argentine peso will begin trading again after having been devalued by the government earlier this week. Meanwhile, protesters took to the streets over strict banking restrictions. The government is freezing some bank accounts to prevent large-scale withdrawals, which could cause the currency to collapse. But people are worried the recent devaluation will trigger inflation and erode savings. Another sign Friday that the Japanese economy is struggling. Wholesale prices in December fell almost 1.5% on an annual basis. It's the 15th consecutive year-on-year decline. The economic report raised new concerns about deflation. Japan's economy is suffering its 3rd recession in a decade. The Japanese currency is trading higher against the dollar for a 2nd straight day after falling to a 3-year low earlier this week. There's growing concern that the yen's decline has happened too quickly, and its overall weakness will cause trouble for other Asian economies. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad says the yen's slide may force him to revise the ringgit's peg to the dollar. The revision may come if the yen falls below 140 to the dollar and if China breaks its link to the dollar. Turning to Europe now, and the Italian banking sector may be about to undergo some dramatic changes. 2 separate mergers are being considered, and experts say it could lead to a round of industry consolidation, similar to what's happened in neighbouring countries. The board of directors of one of the key players, Monte dei Paschi di Siena, meets on Friday.
This is said to be the oldest bank in the world, Monte dei Paschi di Siena. Founded in 1472, it's the most entrenched of all the powerful Italian finance houses. But a merger with Rome-based BNL is now being touted. It would create Italy's 4th biggest bank. A real test of whether the sector is finally ready to put politics to one side and act to create value for shareholders.
I think shareholder value management is picking up in Italy these days. Unfortunately, most of the acquisition and expansion strategies of Italian banks were driven in the past by factors which are not purely economical.
If this merger goes ahead, it would be another sign of the waning financial influence of the Renaissance cities of Florence and Siena. Florence's biggest insurer, Fondiaria, may also soon lose its independence. But even worse than the region's ceding power to Rome or Milan would be losing out to foreign predators. The Spanish banks, nursing their wounds from the collapse in Argentina, are keen to invade Italy, recover their losses and spread their risk. But breaching the defences of Fortress Italy will be tough.
They stand a chance, but in all cross-border mergers, the locals tend to have a very long tradition of taking outsiders to the cleaners. And so it has proved in the past in Italy, and I would say in the future, any bank without very strong Italian connections that is looking at getting into this market risks being taken for a very expensive ride.
Another obstacle is that all mergers must be approved by the central bank, the Banca d'Italia. That's why the first deals will probably be all Italian affairs. Some say the tie-up between BNL and Monte dei Paschi could be sealed within days. Investors will be waiting for the next chapter of this intriguing tale at a shareholders' meeting today. The two banks are under immense political pressure to merge, but such is the secrecy and the mystery of the Italian banking world that there could be many more twists to come. Mike Sargent, BBC News, in the city.
Let's finish off now with a look at the stock market action. And in Europe, we're seeing a mixed picture there. Technology stocks, retailers, healthcare and telecoms are the main risers there. Also, the auto sector is bracing itself for the Ford briefing. The company there is expected to slash production and cut up to 20,000 jobs. On the German index, Deutsche Telekom is a faller, down 2% because it's having to come up with $4 billion to buy a Daimler Chrysler unit. And Carrefour in France, the supermarket chain, is up 5% after it reached its profit goals for 2001. Let's take a look now at the Asian stock market action and how that fared in the last session. And NTT Docomo in Japan was down after figures came out showing fewer subscribers for mobile phones in the last month. On the Hong Kong index there, the Hang Seng was down 89 points. Chinese telecom companies are falling there on competition fears, and also Cathay Pacific was down 5% because it faces a tough 2000. The chip sector in Seoul and Taipei have also been fallers there. Let's take a quick look over at the US markets, which will open in about 2 hours' time. And the main things to watch there are US producer price data, which comes out, and also Alan Greenspan is about to make some moves on interest rates or some comments on that. Well, if you have any questions or comments, you can always contact us by email at biznews@bbc.co.uk. But that's the World Business Report. From all of us here, goodbye.
Busca la salida, es muy importante buscar el espacio para anotar el gol. La marca es dura saliendo con la pelota por la banda izquierda y manda. Cerca de la bola, cabecea y la dentro del área.
Corona, always at major events.
Money doesn't grow on trees.
A shady business never yields a sunny life.
If a family is at peace with itself, its business will succeed.
The BBC's business coverage provides more up-to-date insights for the business world. BBC World, making sense of it all.
Blue.
I'm Adnan Nawaz. This is Sport Today on BBC World. Coming up, Tiger is off the pace in New Zealand as the world #1 scrapes through to make the halfway cut. There's a third straight win for Boston as the Bruins shut out the LA Kings. And Dennis Conner tries again for yachting's America's Cup. The latest edition of Stars and Stripes is unveiled in Manhattan. Hello, welcome once again. We'll start with golf, and after 2 rounds of the New Zealand Open, there are joint leaders. They're the Australian duo of James McLean and Stephen Leaney. Leaney had a second round of 1 under par 70, while this chip in from the edge of the 16th green helped McLean to a 4 under par round of 67.
What a great...
But one major concern for the organisers during Friday's second round was that star attraction Tiger Woods might actually miss the halfway cut. He struggled with his putting once again and carded a 2 over par 73, but Woods did make it through to Saturday's third round, as did New Zealand's Jay An. He's 13 years old and is 3 over par for the tournament. The first Grand Slam event of the tennis season is the Australian Open. It starts on Monday, but before then the leading players are warming up, including Martina Hingis. She's through to the final of the Sydney International after getting the better of Kim Clijsters in their semi-final. The third-seeded Belgian hit back to level the match at 1-set-all after Hingis had taken the opener 7-5. But Hingis then booked her place in the final, winning the decider 6-2, and she'll now face the American Megan Shaughnessy in the final. That's after Serena Williams retired with an ankle injury in their semi-final. Well, in one-day cricket, New Zealand have sprung a surprise. They've beaten the world champions Australia in the opening match of the Triangular Series in Melbourne. They were batting first, and the Kiwis scored a modest 199 for 9 off their 50 overs. But it was their bowlers who won them the match, dismissing Australia for 176 in just 42 overs. South Africa, the third team in this Triangular Series. In the 5-day game, Pakistan have thrashed Bangladesh in the first test in Dhaka. I say a 5-day game, but it lasted just 3 days. Pakistan declaring their first innings with a lead of 330 runs, and then dismissing the home side for just 152. Leg spinner Danesh Kanaria took 7 for 77, Pakistan winning by an innings and 178 runs. Well, this Saturday, boxing's former bantamweight world champion, Britain's Wayne McCulloch, will step back into the ring in Las Vegas. He'll be fighting Alvin Brown, and it'll be McCulloch's first fight for 2 years after he was refused a license by the British Boxing Board, and that was because of abnormalities in a brain scan. It's a decision McCulloch has always disagreed with, and in fact, he's determined to relaunch his career.
Inside his Las Vegas home, back in the ring for the first time in over 2 years. Wayne McCulloch is licensed to fight in the States, but not in Britain after a failed brain scan. But he has overwhelming evidence which proves different.
I've had 14 doctors completely clear me, and 4 of them the British board's own. And I was never really failed, so, you know, the 3 reports that originally failed me, I got to see them like a few months ago and they were clear, so there really isn't a medical reason for me not to fight.
McCulloch, nicknamed the Pocket Rocket, is angry that the British Boxing Board of Control continued to deny him a licence.
The British board took it away from me. If I want to retire, I'll retire on my terms. You know, the British board just said, you know, you can't fight, you're going to die. 1 punch to the head, you're dead. And they were completely and utterly wrong.
This was the moment in October 2000 when McCulloch revealed he'd been told by the board he could never fight again. His family will do everything to get the governing body to change its mind.
I would say they're probably scared of a lawsuit. After losing the case to Michael Watson, they're probably scared of losing another one to Wayne.
The Belfast boxer was the highest paid bantamweight in history after winning the world title in Japan in '95. He challenged unsuccessfully for 3 more world championships, including a fight against Prince Nassim. Wayne McCulloch plans to fight for another world title in April, and he wants to do so not here in America, but in Britain. And he'll continue his battle to regain his license to box at home by filing a lawsuit with the British Boxing Board of Control after this weekend's contest. Stephen Watson, BBC News, Las Vegas.
In the National Hockey League, the Boston Bruins have extended their winning run to 3 matches. They had a 5-0 victory over the LA Kings. And the Bruins were already 2 goals up when a patient build-up saw Sergei Samanov add a 3rd goal 5 minutes into the second period. Any hopes the Kings might have had of getting back into the match disappeared before the end of the period, Glenn Murray scoring a 4th goal for the home side. and a victory already safe. Boston scored a 5th in the final period through Joe Thornton. That's significant because he's the 2nd highest scorer in the NHL this season. While staying in North America, but moving on to the NBA, the Portland Trailblazers, I should say, they overcame a 17-point deficit to beat Miami Heat. Miami's Eddie Jones led a rampant first-half performance for the home team. They appear to be cruising. 55-44, the score at the end of the second quarter. But the Blazers' comeback was a team effort. Rasheed Wallace and Banzai Wells each scored 23 points to keep Portland in the hunt, and they took the game in the final quarter. Damon Stoudemire, the key man, 14 points for him. Portland winning it 92-85. The Winter Olympics are now just a matter of weeks away, and while many athletes are already preparing for Salt Lake City, attention in North America this weekend will be on the ice skating trials for the U.S. Olympic team. Now, America is traditionally very strong in the sport. They have gold medal favorites in both the men's and women's events. Todd Elridge has won 7 world titles and 5 U.S. national championships. But amazingly, he's yet to win a medal in the Olympics, and it could well be his last chance this time. Michelle Kwan, for her part, has an Olympic silver, but no gold, and that's her main aim next month. Kwan recently split with her long-term coach, but she's still training as hard as ever. Now, finally, do you remember the final scene from the film Romancing the Stone? Michael Douglas brought a yacht into the middle of Manhattan. He was trying to woo Kathleen Turner. Well, yachtsman Dennis Conner wasn't romancing a Hollywood diva on Thursday. Rather, it was the American media he was trying to keep interested. He unveiled his Stars and Stripes yacht in Manhattan. It's a craft Conner hopes can help him win back the America's Cup for the New York Yacht Club. Stars and Stripes will compete in the regatta in October. Whoever wins that will then compete in the America's Cup proper against the holders, New Zealand.
To bring the cup back to New York and the New York Yacht Club 20 years after we lost it to Australia. So that's the big thing, a chance for redemption here and to renew the pride and spirit of America. We're America's team, and we're thrilled to have the help of David and his colleagues at Nautica. They helped us win the cup in '88, and we're thrilled to be back with what I'm sure is going to be a winning team.
That's Dennis Conner, 4 times an America's Cup champion. That's all from Sport Today. Goodbye from me.
Behind the breaking news.
Welcome to Reporters.
We take a deeper look.
There'll be an equally formidable foe.
Hundreds of thousands have lost their jobs.
The flooding couldn't have happened at a worse time.
Corruption is slowly destroying Kenya's economy.
Stories beyond the headlines. Reporters at these times on BBC World.
You're watching BBC World with a tale for the United Nations Year of Dialogue Among Civilizations.
It dictates how we live and what we do. We argue about it more than we argue about anything else.
Makes your fingers itch and your pulse race.
Join Peter Jay on a journey through time along the road to riches. This weekend at these times on BBC World.
Hello once again. I just want to give you a quick resume of the weather situation with regard to the Australian fire story, and it isn't particularly brilliant news. Although many of the fires have been controlled, you'll notice there that we're seeing strengthening winds towards the weekend, and no significant rainfall is predicted for the area around about Sydney through New South Wales. See what I mean about the strength of the wind there? Those arrows increasing in size and quantity too, at least for a short while. Major area of low pressure gradually tracking its way down towards New Zealand, bringing wet and windy weather there for one or two areas, but leaving behind a build-in pressure, and that will tend, as I say, to negate the chances somewhat of wet weather getting into Sydney, certainly over the weekend. Where we are seeing more wet weather, though, is further north in association with this massive cloud here just to the east of the Philippines. That's a tropical storm gradually now working its way towards the west. Again, significant winds in its circulation. They have been stronger, but what I think we will find is this flow of moist airs coming in from the east or the northeast will bring a lot of rainfall into particularly the southern half of the Philippines, something to watch there over the next few days. It's a cold northerly that's bringing snow showers into central and northern parts of Japan in association with those areas of low pressure, but to come a little bit further to the west, while high, keeping things a bit drier, a bit colder perhaps, though, as you move into Korea and into many parts of China as well. And I think certainly central and northern parts there, if you're heading towards Beijing, for example, will stay dry and fine and not overly cold for the time of year as we move on through the next couple of days. Now, where we are seeing more cold air is moving down the western side of Canada here as we move on through the weekend. In fact, things looking pretty chilly overall. Some wet weather to come over towards the coast, towards Vancouver, as these areas of low pressure move in. But you'll also notice that as we start to turn some of these winds into the north, so some cold air will eventually first get down across the Great Lakes, and then we'll see another cold plunge getting into the northern states, the Midwest, as we move on through the next few days. No such problems, though, across the bulk of South America. Temperatures around about 29 to 30 or so in Buenos Aires and Rio de Janeiro. I think you'll find something slightly colder than that, though, if you're heading this way towards the British Isles or indeed to continental Europe. Bye-bye.
Reaching 178 million homes around the world. BBC News is next.
1st of January 2002, the dawn of a new era. On that day, 12 countries of the European Union will welcome their new euro banknotes and coins. Over 300 million people in Austria, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Portugal and Spain share 7 euro banknotes and 8 euro coins. The amount of new money needed is staggering. More than 14 billion banknotes are being printed and 50 billion coins are being minted. If placed end to end, the banknotes would reach the moon and back 2.5 times. A new monetary era for over 300 million Europeans and millions of visitors from around the world. The euro, our money.
This week in Talking Movies, Benjamin Bratt as the iconic New York Puerto Rican poet-playwright Miguel Pinheiro, and Ridley Scott's bold and grisly combat film Black Hawk Down.
European Union moves closer to imposing sanctions on Zimbabwe. Ministers from Zimbabwe have begun meeting European Union officials in Brussels. A Russian court upholds a ruling to close the last independent TV station. And the Ford Motor Company is to announce huge job cuts worldwide. Welcome to BBC World News. I'm Nisha Pillay. Ministers from Zimbabwe have begun meeting European Union officials in Brussels. The EU is threatening to impose sanctions against Zimbabwe and its government. International pressure is mounting against the Zimbabwe government because of new legislation granting the police sweeping powers to crack down on the opposition ahead of presidential elections in 2 months' time. The BBC was banned from Zimbabwe last year, so our correspondent Robert Parsons has this report from London.
President Mugabe has pressed hard for these new laws, and now he has them. International condemnation has been swift in coming.
We can't continue to tolerate this huge abuse of human rights. And indeed, this week's legislation, which will ban all free media, which will stifle opposition. You can be arrested for going around saying anything that can be interpreted to be against him. So how can you have an election in those circumstances? We're not allowed to send monitors there. The United States are imposing sanctions. I believe the Commonwealth would seriously consider suspending them now, and the EU could kick it off on January the 28th after this meeting in Brussels today, and I very much hope that that's what will happen.
Farm invasions have been going on for almost 2 years as President Mugabe's land reform program redistributes white farms to black Zimbabweans. The opposition movement for democratic change claims a campaign of terror led by the government is attempting to intimidate its supporters. It's counting on the EU for help.
I believe that the EU is well briefed about the situation in Zimbabwe and that they will do everything in their power to be on the side of the people of Zimbabwe. There needs to be a stepped-up action from the softly approach through targeted sanctions to comprehensive sanctions.
The public order and security law will make it illegal to criticize the president and allows the police to ban demonstrations for up to a month. The General Laws Amendments Bill alters a number of different laws. It bans independent election monitors and restricts the use of leaflets and posters in the election campaign. It also bans absentee voting. Robert Parsons, BBC News.
The Ford Motor Company is expected to announce thousands of job cuts, up to 20,000, after reporting losses of more than $2 billion last year. Most of the cutbacks are likely to be in the US, but the company is also expected to look closely at its European operations. Earlier this week, General Motors announced it was cutting 5,000 jobs in the US.
At the Detroit Motor Show, Ford's launching new products, but the new motto might as well be think big, but not too big. Ford executives survey the new Tonka truck, but behind the scenes, the troubled company's planning a big shake-up. One of the world's most famous firms will cut thousands of jobs to cut costs. It's losing money. So when does the new man in charge with the plan think profits will return?
It isn't going to be quick. Quite frankly, we're looking at a 2+ year timetable, and it could be a little bit longer if the economy doesn't go on our side. And right now, I think you'd have to say the economy is not on our side.
Pickup trucks and sports utility vehicles in North America are the problem. There was a safety scare over one model. And some of Ford's rivals have seemed to have more panache and trendiness in a crowded market. The next wave of 4x4 SUVs will be cars. Small cars with off-road capability plus style. Ford's moving that way, but not fast enough.
That was Stephen Evans reporting, and he joins us now from outside Ford's global headquarters in Detroit. So, Stephen, are the unions bracing themselves now for a grim announcement from Ford today?
Yeah, absolutely no doubt about that. This place has been humming over the past 2 days because they really have been arguing over the details, the executives here. But it's just after 8 o'clock in the morning here in Detroit, and this is what the Motor City wakes up to. No doubt about which way it's going. They know that there are big cuts. Basically, the problem is that Ford is losing something like $10 million every day, so it needs to find $5 billion to even think about getting back into profit. That means cuts. But you have to then ask the question whether this is actually some sort of coherent plan or whether it's basically a company that doesn't quite know where to turn. It is a troubled company, there's no doubt about that.
And from your report, I gathered, Stephen, that it wasn't just about the US general economic slowdown, but Ford has exacerbated things for itself.
Ford had a big row last year with Firestone tyres. Way back, a century ago, Henry Ford, who founded this company pretty well here, was a big friend of a chap called Harvey Firestone. Harvey Firestone created Firestone tyres. Henry Ford created Ford. A year ago, those two companies fell out. One of Ford's vehicles had a tendency to topple over when the tyres blew out. One of those sports utility vehicles, 4x4 off-road vehicles. The two companies had a big row. The tyre company saying, no, it's the vehicle that was at fault. The car company saying, no, it's the tyres that were at fault. But either way, some of the mud stuck probably everywhere, and that hit sales. On top of that, there was a boardroom coup late last year. A chap called Jack Nasser, who'd been in Ford for 30 years, a very impressive man in some ways, was ousted. A new Ford came in at the top, a chap called Bill Ford. So you've had a boardroom coup, you've had massive publicity over a safety scare, you've had losses running at $10 million a day and rising. It is not an easy situation to get out of. One wonders if just cutting jobs is the answer. Ford says, well, they're going to look at the product, and it'll be product, product, product is the phrase, but actually you wonder, well, wasn't it product, product, product before? So, as I say, I do wonder whether this is the plan that saves the company or just another effort in a very sorry process.
We're expecting the details in about an hour or so. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us from Detroit. In Russia, the last independent television channel has lost a court battle to avoid closure. The country's highest arbitration court upheld an earlier ruling that the station, TV6, should close because its debts outweighed its assets. The main shareholder in TV6 is Boris Berezovsky. He's a sharp critic of President Putin, and he's been quoted as saying that the campaign is part of the closure is part of a general campaign by the Kremlin to stifle media dissent. Other critics say that the closure is motivated by TV6's critical reporting of the war in Chechnya. Well, let's get some reaction now from TV6. Executive Director Pavel Korchagin joins us from our Moscow bureau. Do you think this is politically motivated, the closure of TV6, as Boris Berezovsky is saying?
I'm absolutely sure that this is politically motivated. First of all, this is not a closure of a TV station, it's a closure of a TV network, the biggest network in the country, which comprises over 150 local stations. So it's a blow not just on the head company, which is situated in Moscow, but on all the local stations throughout the country. And we're talking about tens of thousands of people throughout the country.
But the moves to close down TV6 weren't brought by the government, were they? They were brought by one shareholder on the grounds that the network was losing too much money.
It is always easier not to, to do the job by your own hands, but to use somebody else to do that job, especially if it is a dirty job. That's why, one of the shareholders was used. But I don't think these shareholders really wanted to be, in that position, but probably it was forced to be in that position. I'm not defending this shareholder, but anyway, in this country you have to understand an event of this magnitude could not have happened without at least very solid approval from the top.
What will be the impact then of the closure of TV6?
The immediate impact is that lots of thousands of people, as I said, in Moscow, in lots of cities, in 400 cities around the countries, will be out of work. But this is not just, the end of the impact. The continuation of the impact is that the TV viewers would be, they won't be able to have an alternative viewpoint on television.
What kind of feedback have you had from viewers so far? What kind of feedback have you had from viewers so far?
I haven't had any feedback from viewers so far because I have been, in these legal conferences and giving interviews all the day. And but we have numerous calls, especially from the cities. We had lots of support, and there was an extreme support to our cause throughout the country. And despite all this support, the authorities decided to close it down, because for them it is easier to close down a channel which potentially, and I underline that, which potentially can be critical of the regime.
Pavel Korchagin, thank you for joining us from Moscow. U.S. troops in southern Afghanistan have sealed off the border with Pakistan near the town of Spin Boldak. They've also begun disarming local Afghans. U.S. and Afghan troops arrived in Spin Boldak from Kandahar for what's believed to be an intense search for remaining al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters there. Earlier, the first group of about 20 al-Qaeda and Taliban prisoners left for Cuba. They'll be detained at the U.S. base there at Guantanamo Bay. Human rights groups have expressed concern at the treatment of the prisoners.
Security was so strict for their departure from Kandahar that there were no TV pictures of the 20 suspects, hooded and in chains. Instead, hundreds of U.S. Marines ringed the base as the transport plane took off for the long flight to Cuba. Gunfire was heard on the edge of the base, a former Taliban stronghold, a reminder that even at their strongest, the American and Allied forces remain vulnerable.
I do not think last night's operation is going to affect the speed with which we move detainees out of here one bit. Quite simply, these were two isolated incidents, and we are going to continue, as the Secretary of Defense has said, to move these detainees to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, because that's where they belong and not here.
The U.S. base at Guantanamo Bay on Cuba is where they'll be kept for the foreseeable future. This defiant little piece of America on the southeastern tip of communist Cuba has been prepared to hold some of the more than 300 al-Qaeda and Taliban suspects the Americans have in custody. Human rights organizations have questioned the conditions in which the detainees will be held behind barbed wire. There are also concerns about the prisoners' rights if tried by military courts. So far, though, the Cubans, who have never accepted the American presence here, seem merely curious about their latest uninvited guests.
You see where the highway is, where you see that hill. After the pond is where the first camp is being prepared. And the other camp that they are preparing is behind some little houses and the hill.
On the streets of the Afghan capital, Kabul, where troops from the British-led security force have been making their first joint patrols with local police, Friday should see the removal of all other armed groups from the city, a vital step in reassuring the city's long-suffering civilians. Jim Fish, BBC News.
Coming up in this programme, turn to the left. Berliners raise a glass to the return of the communists. Stay with us. We'll be back in a few minutes.
The 1st of January 2002. On that day, 12 countries of the European Union will welcome their new euro banknotes and coins. Making their debut alongside the banknotes will be the 8 euro coins, ranging in value from 1 cent to 2 euro. There are 100 cent in 1 euro. The side showing the value is identical across all 12 countries, while the other side features national symbols from each country. However, all coins will be acceptable throughout the euro area. In most euro area countries, national banknotes and coins can still be used until the end of February 2002. But from the 1st of March onwards, the euro will be the sole legal tender in all 12 countries. The euro, our money.
Busca la salida, es muy importante buscar el espacio para anotar el gol. La marca es dura saliendo con la pelota por la banda izquierda y manda. Cerca de la bola, cabecea y la dentro del área.
Corona, always at major events.
again. This is BBC World. These are our main headlines. Zimbabwe faces the threat of EU sanctions as controversial laws are forced through Parliament. And a Russian court upholds a ruling to close the last independent TV station. Here's Aruna Iyengar now with the latest business news from Argentina.
Thanks very much, Nisha. Yes, foreign exchange markets in Argentina have opened for the first time in 3 weeks after violent street demonstrations and looting forced them to close. The national currency, the peso, is being traded for the first time since it was devalued by around a third earlier this week. The dollar sold at 1.6 pesos at the start of business. Meanwhile, riot police fired tear gas to disperse further protests on Friday against Argentina's economic and social crisis.
It started as a huge demonstration outside the presidential palace by people who've lost their savings, their jobs, and any hope for the future, and turned into a riot as the night wore on. In this bankrupt nation, the only state workers being paid at the moment are the police, and they are certainly earning their salary. 40% of this country's population lives in poverty. There is now the very real possibility of social as well as economic chaos.
We are just expressing our anger here.
And frustration?
Yes, of course, frustration. But I think that in the end, politicians have to listen to the people.
The ornate boulevards of this once proud city resembled a war zone as protesters fought pitched battles with the police. This crowd is venting its anger on the people it believes are responsible for the country's problems, the politicians. After years of mismanagement and corruption, for some, the patience is clearly running thin. Banks which have withheld people's savings bore the brunt of their fury. And as the clean-up operation began a few hours later, the nation prepared for further damage to its economy. Argentina's currency, the peso, is expected to plummet in value when trading opens today. David Willis, BBC News, Buenos Aires.
There's more encouraging news from the airline industry. BAA, the world's #1 airport operator, says passenger numbers at its 7 UK airports fell less last month than in November. It's an indication demand is recovering after the September 11th attacks in the United States. Frankfurt Airport has also reported a similar trend. Steel prices are staging a comeback after languishing at 20-year lows. Europe's biggest steelmaker, Usinor, is raising prices by as much as 10%, and its rival ThyssenKrupp says it may follow suit. Rising prices may suggest economies are rebounding as consumers buy more cars and washing machines. More revelations now following the collapse of energy trader Enron. Accounting firm Arthur Andersen is to be investigated by the US Securities and Exchange Commission after admitting destroying a substantial number of documents relating to its audit of Enron. The collapse of Enron in December was the biggest corporate failure in US history. Later on Friday, the auction of the more lucrative parts of Enron comes to an end. It's known that global banking giants Citicorp and UBS Warburg have submitted bids for a controlling stake in its dormant energy trading business. Let's finish now with a look at the European stock market action, and as we can see, a mixed picture there. Technology stocks, retailers, healthcare and telecoms are risers, and in the auto sector, after the Ford briefing where they're expected to slash production costs, the markets are bracing themselves, or the auto sector is bracing itself for big job cuts there. Well, that's the business news for the moment. Back to you, Nisha.
Thank you, Aruna. In Madagascar, the main opposition candidate in the presidential elections, Mark Ravalomanana, has called for a halt to widespread anti-government protests. Tens of thousands of his supporters have been demonstrating on the streets of the capital for almost a week ahead of official results expected to give him victory. But unofficial government figures say he can't avoid a runoff contest with President Didier Ratsirach. The High Constitutional Court is due to announce the official results later this month. Now, in Germany, the successors to the communists are making something of a political comeback. Next week, they'll be part of the local government of the capital city, Berlin. After their impressive showing in the capital's elections, the renamed Party of Democratic Socialism, or PDS, that's what they're now called, has joined a coalition with the ruling Social Democrats. It's proving a highly controversial move.
He can't forgive and he can't forget. In 1975, East Germany's communist rulers sentenced Rainer Schubert to 15 years in prison for helping people escape to the West. He spent 2 of them here, in solitary confinement.
It was a terrible time. No newspaper, no pencil, nothing, no book, nothing. In the night, all 4 minutes, turn on the switch on the light. The woman's downstairs crying for her children. They took them away if they arrested. It was a hard time. And these people who do that all, who made the concentration camp GDR, these people are now in the government?
Others share his disbelief. August the 13th, 1961. That's the night the communists erected the Berlin Wall, slicing through houses, streets, rivers, dividing families and the city for nearly 3 decades. Now, the political heirs of those who built the wall and shot anyone trying to cross it are joining the government of the German capital for the first time. And that's dividing opinion here, with many West Berliners deeply suspicious. It's a different story in the East. Bars like this one reflect a growing nostalgia for the old days. 1 in 2 Easterners voted for the former Communist Party of Democratic Socialism in Berlin's elections. And the PDS will control 3 key ministries in the new government.
Of course, there are people who still have really strong reservations about my party. We have to reassure them through our actions, try to counter prejudice and reduce their fears. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean those people will then vote for us, but we hope they will accept us.
But some still question how far the former communists have really changed.
I believe that they are not interested very much in pluralism, not in the kind of democracy I would cherish.
So what are they interested in?
In having power and securing it.
Now they have it, they have their work cut out. To try to tackle Berlin's massive debts, many state-owned nursery schools will be privatised. Spending cuts and tax increases are expected. Tough decisions face a party which knows success in the capital could be a first step on the way to an eventual role in national government. Rebecca Jones, BBC News, Berlin.
This is BBC World. Here's Adnan now with the latest sports news.
Thanks a lot, Nisha. Hello again. We'll start with golf, and after 2 rounds of the New Zealand Open, there are joint leaders. They're the Australian pair of James McLean and Stephen Leaney. Leaney had a second round of 1 under par 70, and this chip in from the edge of the 16th helped McLean to a 4 under par round of 67. But one major concern for the organisers was this man, Tiger Woods. He struggled during his second round and almost was going to miss the cut. Didn't putt very well. He finished with 2 over par 73, but he did make it through to Saturday's 3rd round, as did New Zealand's Jae Ahn. Ahn is 13 years old. Here he is. He's originally from Korea, and he's 3 over par for the tournament. Well, in one-day cricket, New Zealand have sprung a surprise. They've beaten the world champions Australia in the opening match of the Triangular Series in Melbourne. Batting first, the Kiwis scored a modest 199 for 9 off their 50 overs. But it was their bowlers who won them the match. They dismissed Australia for 176 in only 42 overs. The 3rd team in this triangular series are South Africa. And in the 5-day game, Pakistan have thrashed Bangladesh in the first test in Dhaka. The match actually only lasted 3 days. Pakistan declaring their first innings with a lead of 330 runs. They then dismissed the home side for 152 in their second innings. Leg spinner Danesh Kanaria took 7 for 77. Pakistan winning by an innings and 178 runs. Now, this Saturday, boxing's former world bantamweight champion, Britain's Wayne McCulloch, will step back into the ring in Las Vegas against Alvin Brown. It'll be his first fight for 2 years after he was refused a license by the British Boxing Board because of abnormalities in a brain scan. It's a decision McCulloch has always disagreed with, and he's determined to relaunch his boxing career.
Inside his Las Vegas home, back in the ring for the first time in over 2 years. Wayne McCulloch is licensed to fight in the States, but not in Britain after a failed brain scan. But he has overwhelming evidence, which proves different.
I've had 14 doctors completely clear me, and 4 of them the British board done. And I was never really failed, so, you know, the 3 reports that originally failed me, I got to see them like a few months ago, and they were clear, so there really isn't a medical reason for me not to fight.
McCulloch, nicknamed the Pocket Rocket, is angry that the British Boxing Board of Control continued to deny him a licence.
The British board took it away from me. If I want to retire, I'll retire on my terms. You know, the British board just said, you know, you can't fight, you're going to die. One punch to the head, you're dead. And they were completely and utterly wrong.
This was the moment in October 2000 when McCulloch revealed he'd been told by the board he could never fight again. His family will do everything to get the governing body to change its mind.
I would say they're probably scared of a lawsuit. After losing the case to Michael Watson, they're probably scared of losing another one to Wayne.
The Belfast boxer was the highest paid bantamweight in history after winning the world title in Japan in '95. He challenged unsuccessfully for 3 more world championships, including a fight against Prince Nassim. Wayne McCulloch plans to fight for another world title in April, and he wants to do so not here in America, but in Britain. And he'll continue his battle to regain his licence to box at home by filing a lawsuit with the British Boxing Board of Control after this weekend's contest. Stephen Watson, BBC News, Las Vegas.
That's all the sports news for the moment. Nisha, back to you.
Thanks so much, Adnan. Now, main news again. Now, ministers from Zimbabwe have begun meeting European Union officials in Brussels. The EU is threatening to impose sanctions against Zimbabwe and its government because of draconian new laws that the government has pushed through in the last few days. And that's all from the newsroom. From Adnan and from me, goodbye.
Hello once again. I've got a tremendous satellite picture for you right across South Asia, showing in fact the first signs of snowfall there into the area around about Afghanistan, perhaps the first significant snowfalls of winter. Elsewhere though, across much of South Asia, it's largely dry and fine. Some early morning mist to contend with across the northern parts of India, 1 or 2 showers getting into the far south as well. I suspect we'll see 1 or 2 more showers perhaps down towards Sri Lanka, but Colombo, you notice they're forecasting pretty much dry and fine weather, just the odd shower perhaps creeping in during the afternoon. As we move a little bit further towards the east, it looks as though the islands of Indonesia stand out there very nicely indeed, just with the odd shower around. But if you happen to catch one of those, well, what a time they've had in the southern parts of Sumatra. Significant flash floods there, dozens of villages affected, a number of fatalities as well. And of course, there's very much a feature, particularly of the wet season. Now, moving a little bit further north, there's some wet weather just getting into the southern parts of China. Some heavy showers there, snow showers at this time of year, moving in across the northern parts of Japan. But that area of high pressure close by Korea at the moment will gradually move its way over towards Japan, calming things down for a time, but then you see the next area of low pressure is really not very far away at all. Let's move a little bit further to the south across Australasia. Well, some showers across the far north, as we would expect. Pretty unsettled weather too down towards New Zealand. Big area of low pressure very much dominating the scene there. But around about the fire-affected areas, both in the east and in the west, it doesn't look like there's going to be any significant rainfall over the next couple of days. Showers are plenty, though, across the central and eastern parts of Brazil and along the Chilean coast as well. Moving further north, it's something a good deal more organised than showers moving across the midwest of the USA just at the moment. That area of low pressure with its attendant front gradually clearing the eastern seaboard as we move over the next couple of days. High pressure then building in at least for a time, but then notice quite a vicious area of low pressure will bring significant snowfall into the Midwest and around about the Great Lakes as we move on through the weekend. Further north in Canada, no great heat wave here, but then you wouldn't expect it at this time of year. In fact, quite mild over on the west coast there at Vancouver, but there will be some rains as well. And I'll leave you with some thoughts about Europe. Big area of high pressure, very much the dominant feature here, largely dry and fine, but more significant rains and snows to come for Norway. Bye-bye.
It's a movie classic. Exclusive news, reviews, and interviews direct from America. Talking Movies, next on BBC World. World.
Talking Movies is sponsored by Corona, a beer miles away from ordinary.
New York, I'm Tom Brooke. In today's program, U.S. military heroics on display in Black Hawk Down. Clean-cut Benjamin Bratt gets a bit edgy with a portrayal of Miguel Pinheiro. And the time travel romantic fantasy, Kate and Leopold. All that and more in this edition of Talking Movies.
Talking Movies. Talking Movies. Talking Movies. Talking Movies. Talking Movies.
Director Ridley Scott is a man of many talents. Over the years, he's created some strong cinema. Alien, Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, and more recently, Gladiator and Hannibal. Now he's turned his hand to an intense combat picture, Black Hawk Down, which presents American soldiers in action, not in Afghanistan, but in Somalia in 1993. Richard McCaffrey reports.
RPG! Hold on! 6-4, go down! Black Hawk Down.
Black Hawk Down is a brutal reenactment of the real-life events of the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993. Its ensemble cast includes Josh Hartnett, Ewan McGregor, Tom Sizemore, and Eric Bana. US soldiers were in Somalia as part of a UN peacekeeping effort to help relieve famine. The military mission that is detailed in the film involves US forces storming a building in the center of Mogadishu. The military men thought it would be a quick and relatively easy operation.
They've been planning it and rehearsing it for days on end, and with no event, you know, and then suddenly on the day of the procedure, all hell broke loose.
Look, we have stirred up the hornet's nest here.